August 1991, and the WWF's big SummerSlam 91 pay-per-view dominates this month's push scores, as Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior beat the Iraqi Triangle of Terror in a handicap match made in hell, with the debuting Sid Justice as guest referee. So WWF champion Hulk Hogan is number 1 for August, Warrior's number 2, Slaughter's number 3 in what was effectively the end of his last big run, referee Sid's number 4, and Slaughter's henchmen of Colonel Mustafa and General Adnan come in at number 8. So a full half of this month's top 10 centres around one big match. Given the way that match dominates this month's rankings, it'd be remiss not to pause over it. It's not a brilliant match itself, far from it, but I do have to say that the SummerSlam 91 show as a whole was really good. It was undisputedly one of my favourites as a kid, and still stands up really well today as one of the best pay-per-views of that classic 85 to 92 era. I'll get on to the rest of the card in a sec, but the main event saw, incredibly, the Hogan vs Slaughter rivalry was now entering its 7th month, despite Hogan pinning Slaughter clean at WrestleMania 7 to apparently settle the whole thing 5 months previously. Warrior had been caught up in a feud against The Undertaker, and now the newly heel-turned Jake Roberts, more of whom later. But for now he'd been co-opted into teaming with his old rival Hogan to see off the Iraqis once and for all, months after Operation Desert Storm had actually ended in the real world. The story of the match made in hell is whether referee Big Sid Justice will show favouritism towards one side or the other, but Sid stands up to all 5 of them and isn't taking any BS. The faces dominate, the heels dominate. Sid has big moments squaring up to both Hogan and Warrior. Warrior chases Mustafa and Adnan to the back with a chair, where away from the TV cameras he was then promptly fired by Vince McMahon backstage for holding him up for money. And Hogan then pins Slaughter with a leg drop after throwing quote-unquote victory powder in his face for the far from clean win. After the match, Hogan calls out Sid back out and poses with him, apparently endorsing Sid as the WWF's next big superstar. Other WWF stars in this month's top 10 are the Mountie Jacques Rougeau, making his singles debut at number 6. So the Mountie actually lost his SummerSlam match, a jailhouse match, to the Big Boss Man at the pay-per-view. But the way the push-me-pull scoring system works is that on mega big super shows, so 20k plus attendance, backstage skits and interviews as well as matches also score points, and the Mountie was featured in numerous backstage skits throughout the SummerSlam show, as he loses the match to Boss Man, is cuffed by, as he calls them, local hit cops from New York, gets driven off in a paddy wagon, taken to jail, photographed, fingerprinted, and then thrown in the slammer. It's all just brilliant stuff from the Mountie. He's all over this show. And I would argue his entire SummerSlam performance is the highlight of the character's run, even more so than his brief Intercontinental title reign a few months later. The whole thing's just a masterclass in seeing a Weasley heel get his comeuppance, and I have absolutely zero qualms about the scoring system rewarding the Mountie so heavily this month. He gets a stonking high new entry in the 12-month PMP50 as well, which I'll update as usual at the end of this video. The Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal, come in at number 7 as they finally beat the Nasty Boys in a Anything Goes match to win the WWF Tag Team titles at SummerSlam. The other huge news coming out of this pay-per-view, and it was pretty massive, was that the fired WCW World Champion Ric Flair does indeed appear to be on his way in, and is apparently coming for Hogan himself. In a huge moment at SummerSlam, Bobby Heenan leaves the broadcast booth and confronts Hogan backstage with the NWA World title big gold belt, which Flair still physically owned and was still recognised as, and throws down a challenge to Hogan on behalf of the real world's champion Ric Flair. So, with Flair and Sid in and Warrior out, there's very interesting times in the WWF ahead. Elsewhere at SummerSlam and just outside of the top 10, Bret Hart upset Mr. Perfect to win the Intercontinental title and begin his singles rise in a superb match, which was every bit as good as I remember it being and is my match of the month for August. Randy Savage got married to Miss Elizabeth, who then had their wedding reception crashed by the newly heel-turned Jake the Snake and The Undertaker. Ted DiBiase lost his $1 million belt to his former bodyguard Virgil in a match that was a lot better than I remember it being, a lot of which was down to a crowd that was red hot for Virgil, as well as Roddy Piper being brilliant on commentary. DiBiase Virgil was genuinely the second best match on the card here. Elsewhere, the British Bulldog, Texas Tornado and Ricky Steamboat teamed up to beat the Warlord Power and Glory in a 6-man tag opener. The Natural Disasters of Earthquake and Typhoon beat the Bushwhackers, despite the clearly not well Andre the Giant being in the Bushwhackers' corner. And the new Taxman heel Erwin R. Shyster beat Greg Valentine in his pay-per-view debut. It was just a really good card in which almost all of the good guys won, and for its era was about as good of a wrestling show as you're going to get. Brilliant stuff from the WWF. They almost always delivered on pay-per-view in this era, and despite all the problems the company was having behind the scenes with bad press over ongoing steroid allegations, this was yet another very strong show from them. Another company who had a great month was New Japan, and NJPW wrestlers make up the remainder of August's top 10. IWGP Heavyweight Champion Tatsumi the Dragon Fujinami is at number 5, Junior Heavyweight Champion Jushin Thunder Liger is at number 9, and the winner of the first G1 Climax tournament, Masahiro Chono's at number 10. So, New Japan staged a succession of 4 big shows, hosting the very first round-robin G1 Climax. 8 men competed in the tournament, including veterans Fujinami and Riki Choshu, foreigners Big Van Vader, Bam Bam Bigelow and Scott Norton, and last but not least, rising native stars Kiji Muto, Masa Chono and Shinya Hashimoto, who were increasingly being referred to as the 3 Musketeers of New Japan, looking to come and take the top spots from the aging established stars Fujinami and Choshu. After a great tournament, the highlight of which was Muto beating Vader in a superb match, which I'll link to in the video description, the finals came down to Chono versus Muto, with Chono getting the big win and a future title shot against Fujinami. It was, again, great stuff. Junior Heavyweight Champion Jushin Liger was exchanging that belt with Akira Nogami and facing WCW's Flying Brian Pillman for the first time in Japan. And outside of the top 10, the tag team of Hiroshi Hase and Kensuke Sasaki were still being pushed strongly too, until Sasaki picked up a leg injury that put him on the shelf for a bit. So, only 2 of the big 4 companies represented in the top 10 this month. In WCW, it was a pretty underwhelming first month on top for the new WCW World Champion Lex Luger, and they were scrambling a bit as Luger bedded in as a heel again, as the total package, with manager Harley Race and bodyguard Mr. Hughes. WCW TV ratings were hitting all-time lows, with Luger's 2 first primary challengers emerging as Ron Simmons, as well as his Great American Bash opponent Barry Windham, who is now in a kind of tweener turning face role and aligning himself with Simmons. It certainly didn't help WCW's credibility with the confusion of Ric Flair leaving the company with the big gold belt and still being recognised as the NWA World Champion. Flair had been the face of WCW for so long, and he was gone. The US title had now also been declared vacant after Luger won the vacant WCW World title last month, and Sting won a tournament at the Omni to become the new US champion late in the month. For All Japan, Jumbo Tsuruta remained Triple Crown champion, and the Super Generation Army combo of Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada remained tag team champions. They'd have one of their big quarterly Budokan Hall shows next month. So, a quick roundup of other happenings in August, and then onto the PMP50 update. The USWA was back in Memphis's Mid-South Coliseum after a few months in limbo at the Pipkin. Jerry Lawler regained the USWA title from Awesome Kong, marking his 9th run with that belt, but then lost it to Dragon Master, not the Kendo Nagasaki version, just a random masked guy, late in the month. In Mexico's EMLL, Conan was still being pushed as the company's top technico, involved in a major feud against Pero Aguayo, who'd taken his mask earlier in the year. Other top good guys were Atlantis, Octagon, Vampiro Casanova, and Rayo de Jalisco Jr., with the top rudos being Cien Caras and El Satanico. In Japan's FMW, Atsushi Onita staged a major outdoor event in conjunction with the Tosu Rock Festival, beating Sambo Asako in a violent barbed wire deathmatch tournament. In the new Global Wrestling Federation out of Dallas, which was essentially replacing the now defunct World Class and taking over the USWA's ESPN TV slot, the Patriot became the new GWF North American champion with a win over Al Perez in a tournament final. And finally, in Japan's SWS, Genichiro Tenryu continued to lead his Revolution stable and teamed with Ashura Hara to fight the WWF's Legion of Doom in a big tag tournament final at Yokohama Arena. So, how do the push scores for August affect the rolling PMP50? As ever, as a reminder, the PMP50 updates on a rolling month-by-month basis with weighted push scores for each company dependent on how big they were at the time. So we subtract the points for August 1990 and add the scores for August 91 to cover the 12-month period of September 1990 to August 91. And there's actually quite a bit of movement in the 50 this month, which there always does tend to be after one of the WWF's big quarterly pay-per-views. Hulk Hogan finally returns to number 1 as the Wrestler of the Year, flipping with Ultimate Warrior at about the point I expected him to. 5 months of the last 12 for Hogan as WWF Champion, 5 for the Warrior, and 2 for Sergeant Slaughter at number 3. Ric Flair remains at 4, Tatsumi Fujinami moves up into the top 5 at 5, Randy Savage actually moves back up to number 6, despite being officially retired at this point. I struggled to decide whether to give Savage points for SummerSlam. He kind of co-main evented it, technically, even though he didn't wrestle a match. The match made in heaven did close the pay-per-view, and in the end I settled on giving him half points for a pay-per-view main event, which was the equivalent of just wrestling a normal undercard match in the show, but it still lifted Savage above Sting in the 12-month scoring. Sting was dropping down the top 10 after being essentially demoted for a spell from WCW World Title level to US Champion level. New WWF Tag Team Champions, the Legion of Doom, move up in the top 10, the first tag team we'd had in the top 10 for a while, with Earthquake stubbornly refusing to leave at 9 and All Japan's Jumbo Tsuruta returning to the top 10 at 10. Outgoing Intercontinental Champion Mr. Perfect drops out of the top 10 at 11, New Japan's Riki Choshu's at 12, Ted DiBiase rises back up to 13, while the WWF's Texas Tornado and All Japan's Stan Hansen drop to 14 and 15. The Steiner Brothers at 16. I'm keeping the Hart Foundation as a team at 17 for now, even though Bret Hart had just won the IC title as a single. He'd held it for a matter of days at this point, whereas the vast majority of his points for the 12-month period had still come from his 7 months as WWF Tag Champion alongside Jim Neidhart, so keeping them as a unit for now. WCW World Champion Lex Luger rises to 18, the WWF's Undertaker rises to 19, Sid Justice rockets up to number 21, as do the Nasty Boys at 24. WCW's El Gigante continues to rise at 25, thanks to appearances for both WCW and New Japan. Towards the bottom end of the top 30, WWF mid-carders Typhoon, Greg Valentine and the Warlord all accrue enough points to move up a notch or two. I'll also mention that I've parsed Axe away from Smash and Crush at 29, the latter two Demolition members, still having scored highly enough over the 12-month period to remain in the top 30, but Axe now dropping out of the top 50 entirely. Moving into the top 50, the Mountie comes barreling in as the highest new entry at 31. After all, his SummerSlam points boost his 12-month total, while New Japan's Keiji Muto at 35, Jushin Liger at 36, and Masa Chono at 41 all make gains too. I finally split up the tag team of Muto and Chono this month, by the way, as they were both now getting solid singles pushes and clearly being positioned independently as the rising stars of New Japan. WCW's Ron Simmons and Brian Pillman both move up at numbers 39 and 44 respectively, as does the WWF's British Bulldog at 45. The second Yellow Circle new entry this month is the team of the Bushwhackers, and the Bushwhackers are an interesting case study. They'd been kicking around the WWF as a lower card comedy act since late 1988, but as the WWF lost a succession of big stars in 1990 and 91, the Bushwhackers started to get featured more and more. They were massively over with the kids in the audience, and here they are in the 50 most featured acts in the industry once again. All Japan's Mitsuharu Misawa hangs on at 49, and I expect Misawa to recover further as 91 rolls on, now that the Super Generation Army recovered some momentum again by winning Tag Team Gold. So, with the Mountie and the Bushwhackers entering the 50, we say goodbye to 4 acts this month, due to splitting the teams of both Demolition and Muto and Chono up as well. So we say goodbye to the WWF's Demolition Axe, Dino Bravo and the Orient Express, and finally goodbye to the bad stench that was WCW's Black Scorpion as well. And that leaves us with the WWF still dominant with 28 of the 50 spots, WCW with 9, New Japan with 6, All Japan with 5, and 1 apiece still for the USWA and EMLL. Join me next time for September 91, where we've got televised supercards on tap from WCW, All Japan and EMLL to look forward to. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave any comments below, and keep on with me through 1991 looking at who is being pushed hardest and where. Thanks for watching. Cheers.